Greetings from Radha. I find myself inside a property of this big compound called Radha. Acquired a few years after Srila Prabhupada's passing. Last Tuesday or Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Tuesday. And tomorrow is the last full day, then continuing to the UK, to England. Radical personalism and trying to make some elaboration, some exploration on those. So we have been talking, for those who have been following some of the lectures, we have been talking these days of vulnerability, divine humanism, and making peace with matter. What else? We talked yesterday about non-dual thinking. Today we plan to talk about the light and shadow in the guru-disciple relationship, and so on and so forth. So in some way, trying to share some appetizer of what we plan to be an even further, more comprehensive immersion the next days in the UK, when we will have a whole 1-week retreat trying to delve deeply into these 7 pillars that somehow manifested themselves organically, 7 pillars of what both radical personalism and Tadatmya Sangha. When we engage in the Nam Karana Samskar, or the name-giving ceremony of our tribe at the beginning of this year, less than a year, wow. Naturally, these 7 main themes came, which constitute each one of the 7 main topics of the last 7 chapters of radical personalism, and somehow constitute the 7 pillars of Tadatmya Sangha. They came naturally. Vulnerability, individuation, non-dual thinking, proper this sensitivity and guru-disciple relationship, divine ignorance, contemplative prayer, and the concept of unearthing heaven, on discovering the divine in the immediate, in the material world. So it has been a very beautiful exploration. And also a few days ago, maybe some of you have heard that, since I mentioned in some of the classes, I've had the chance of recording a very interesting conversation, a podcast with Krishna Kshetra Maharaj. So we have been talking about what he refers to as dialogical Vaishnavism, or the concept of dialogue, and how it plays out in the Vaishnava tradition, in having conversations not only with other traditions, but with other members of other of our own Vaishnava tradition, and ultimately to understand reality as an ongoing conversation itself. No, we were making that, for me, important point, that if everything, as we talked yesterday, since everything is interconnected, somehow everything is in dialogue with everything else. There is an ongoing conversation due to the relationality and interconnectedness of everything in existence. So we were talking about that, and Maharaj told me, yes, therefore we have a ontological, metaphysical basis for for dialogue. No, in other words, we have no excuse to not engage in dialogue, because the whole of reality is engaging in dialogue by its very nature. So anyhow, some interesting points came. I think we will be sharing that conversation first. We will be our first podcast of the month of October. His, and then one with another rabbi that we had a conversation a few months ago. So that said, I feel very honored and blessed and happy to be sitting in circle. At least in my mind, we are sitting in circle now. Although Zoom is not showing a circle, but it's showing a very interesting set of squares. Maybe there is some paid option for Zoom where you can select how to see the guests and pick your own design or mandala. So happy to be with all of you in sacred circle, in Sangha, today, hopefully with lots of tadatmya, lots of same-heartedness and empathy, whether at the time of sharing concerns, questions, thoughts, and opening hearts one to another. So that's it. Let's, I see a few hands raised, so I don't want to overextend myself. Also, I have another lecture in a few hours and another lecture after those few hours, so I may not go that far, but let's go where we end up. So Pranada is raising her first hand, so please welcome Pranada.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, obeisances. I have a question, but before I ask it, by mentioning your conversation with Krishna Kshetra Swami made me wonder if you've had any other interesting conversations in Radha that you'd like to. Have you met anybody new? Are you finding any connections there?
Oh, I see. Well, I've been not so much like, I mean, I've been given programs every day at the house of a couple of devotees, one disciple of Sachinandan Maharaj, one disciple of Krishna Kshetra Maharaj. So I've been mostly moving from my room to their house to do the programs. And of course, some walks here, but also, again, I'm trying to be sensitive in the sense of, okay, I'm visiting an ISKCON property, and I'm a sannyasi who is not from ISKCON, and some may feel a little bit unsettled about a sannyasi, non-ISKCON sannyasi roaming around by himself with some previous not so good experiences. So I understand them. So I'm trying to be sensitive about that. And of course, I've been visiting the properties with the devotees who are invited me, but I'm not so much on an independent quest inquiring from each one. But of course, I'm having very nice conversations with those devotees who have been invited to the programs and who have been coming to the lectures. I will say, I don't know. See, so far, yeah, I've met like some 20 devotees, some Prabhupada disciples, some other devotees who already knew from our Govardhan Dandavat Parikram. That was nice. Also, two of them were here, but and it's nice because I had a chance of meeting them actually, because in Govardhan Dandavat Parikram, of course, we had a chance of meeting them on the dust to dust. But this is from another perspective, so that's nice. Some of them, many of them, as you may imagine, here Radha is a place of education mostly, so to say. So many of them are PhDs and are working on their respective thesis and things, and it's interesting because many of them seem to be working on things similar to the things I'm working or I have been working. So we end up having very nice walks and conversations of the ever expansiveness of reality and so on and so forth. I won't go into the details now because I will get lost and found. But
well,
yeah,
thank you for
yeah,
that.
there have been, and there will continue to be very exciting conversations for sure. Thanks for asking.
Maharaj, it's probably a quick question. I remember hearing at some point that Sanatana Goswami or somebody is the one who gave us the information that, or the significance of Radha's Kartik month coming preceding Krishna's month of Magha Shirsha. And I'm wondering, is that, where did we get that information? The important that Radha's month precedes Krishna's month, then the significance of that.
Okay, let me see if I understood the question correctly. Your question is where, or which is, so to say, the source for the idea that Radha's month comes after Krishna's month?
Before Krishna's month.
Before Krishna's month, sorry.
Yeah, and where it comes from, and if you want to make any comments about Radha's month coming before Krishna's month.
Okay.
And if you don't know, that's all right. I should do more research.
That was going to be my answer. I don't know. I mean, I don't remember, will be more specific, because I remember having read that, but it's not coming to me at this precise moment, the exact source. Of course, I can do my homework after the meeting and try to do some research.
Well, tell me where I should look. I can do some research too.
No, I don't know where you should look. I mean, I will do my universal prayer and try to see in which direction it was that.
Okay. All right. Well, it's not in the Dig Darshani Tika, so.
Yeah, that's what I was hinting at. I was hinting probably this is coming from some commentary by Sanatana Goswami to one verse in the Bhagavatam, which of course then the question is, which is the verse? Because
yeah,
there is no particular verse in the Bhagavatam in connection to
well,
Radha's
you showed them.
appearance, so it may be something in connection to Krishna's appearance probably. So, but I can do some quick search, no problem.
Okay.
I'm writing it down here, so I'm a good boy and do my homework in the service.
But it's Maharaj, you're so busy. So Maharaj, you're so busy. So don't put this like something you need to do right away.
I have to get my professional researcher assistant, which will never happen. So practical, I do it myself. But in connection to your question, besides the specific source, so to say, so you are asking me how to understand the notion of Radha's month coming before Krishna's month.
Right.
Like Kartik, Brata, Margashirsha. Okay. Of course, this is more an interpretation, if you want to put it, and I'm not relativizing anything of that by saying this, but it's like a reading, like what we would call a bhavanubad, right? When bhavanubad is this is a term for when some acharyas, sadhus, write a commentary on a book based on their bhava. So you expect something very subjective, very personal, which is great, it's glorious, I'm not diminishing any of that, but it's kind of a personal reading of a personal interpretation, but through bhav. So it's not so much interpretation by some rational adjustment, but personal subjective reading of reality by what's going on in the heart of this person. So on that foundation, I will say some acharyas may have made the point of, okay, Radha's month coming before Krishna's month, and there are many different readings in that connection, so we can mention a few of them. Of course, the most popular one is something to the effect that first there is bhakti and then comes Krishna, right? First there is Radha, bhakti personified, Bhakti Devi, Prema Devi, and out of bhakti Krishna comes, no, like to our life. First, or you could say first there is bhakti in the form of bhakta, sadhu sangha. That's how bhakti comes to our lives, and eventually there is the realization of Krishna. Of course, this a way of putting it. We are not saying that first and second, which means before the first, the second did not exist or anything like that. But also making the point of like whenever there is bhakti, Krishna follows, right? That's another way of putting it. And of course, if you want to make the point in its most personal, esoteric form, is whenever there is Radha, Krishna follows. Now, wherever Radha goes, he goes after her. No. So that's a way of putting. Of course, there is another reading that you can make. Is like, oh, Radha comes first, and then comes Krishna, and Radha is following after him. No, so to say, no, because the name Radha, if you repeat it enough times, transforms into Dhara. Dhara in Sanskrit, Dhara means like current, and many acharyas have interpreted the and Dhavati, also Radha, the Dha in Radha is sometimes read as Dhavati, which means to run after. So sometimes this means like Radha is running after Krishna in spirit of service, to give pleasure to him. She cannot but run in that direction, flow like an uninterrupted current. No, again, that's the nature of bhakti. Haituki apratihata. No, it's unbroken, uncontainable, and ever evolving, and so on and so forth. So that's another way of reading in the opposite direction. Okay, Radha is coming and she's running after Krishna, who comes after. But the other order is also even more valid for most Gaudiyas, probably. First there is Radha, first there is Bhakti, and whatever that manifests Krishna has to be there. Krishna cannot but be there because he's like this famous verse of the Bhagavatam, arguably I wouldn't say this is my favorite because it's so difficult to say that. Like if one asks you, what's your favorite parikram place in Vrindavan? You are almost feeling I'm about to commit some aparad by selecting one. Right? So what's your favorite verse in the Bhagavatam? But for sure, this is in the top, I don't know, top 10. I dare to say top 10. Why not? It's bold to say that, but yeah, let's put it in the top 10. Anubrajamyaham nityam. It says, no, it becomes say nirapeksham munim samtam nivairam samadarshanam anubrajamyaham nityam pujjayeti angrirenuvihi. So there Krishna is talking to Uddhav. This is 11th canto. For me, 11th canto is one of my favorites also. Among the cantos in itself is beautiful. And then Krishna is speaking about his devotees and different qualities of his devotees. The devotees nirapeksha, is muni, is shantam, is peaceful, is wise, is detached, and so on. And then he says, Anubrajami ham nityam. Anubrajami, braja means to go. Ananu means to go, to walk after, not to go walk behind, following someone. So anubrajami aham, Krishna says, I, nityam, perpetually follow in the footsteps of my devotees. No? So whenever they go, I follow their footsteps. We are always told to follow the footsteps ourselves, right? But that's how Krishna reciprocates, right? That's an important point that sometimes we miss, no? That the very same prayers and verses that we may, expressions that we may invoke to express ourselves in connection to Krishna, Krishna can take all those prayers and expressions and repeat them himself in relation to how he feels for his devotees. No? So we say, I hope to follow in the footsteps of Bhagavan. Bhagavan takes the verse, I hope to follow in the footsteps of my devotee. No? And in this way, Bhagavan is plagiarizing all our prayers, so to say. So in this verse, he's saying, Anubrajamyaham nityam pujayeti angrirenubihi. No, even that's the same, the last line is here more intense. Pujayeti angrirenubihi. Pujayeti means to worship. Angri means feet, and renubihi. Renu means dust. So I perpetually follow after the footsteps of my devotees, and I hope to be purified by the dust of their feet, which I worship. No? That's Krishna speaking. Again, if I'm not clarifying it's Krishna, we may take, oh, that's some devotee praying to Krishna, praying to be purified by Krishna's lotus foot dust and blah, all that. No. This is Krishna not reversing the situation, but just reciprocating accordingly. So yeah, this verse from Devata, and of course, is Krishna speaking about his devotees. But every time we say his devotees, naturally, if we become a little reductionistic, we end up talking about the devotee, and the devotee is she, no, the goddess, Sri Radha. So ultimately, that verse, that's how my mind works in cases like this. Okay, that verse is Krishna speaking about his devotees, but in this particular case, that verse ultimately is him speaking about her. No. On some level, it applies to everyone, but on the most unique, the profound, specific level, he's telling that to her personally. No? So that's a way of saying how, again, it's one of the verses, maybe the verse par excellence in the Bhagavatam.
Do other commentators say that, what you just said, that he's speaking primarily to Radha? Do other commentators say that he's speaking primarily to Radha? Have you seen that? No? Okay, no. Your insight.
That's just coming in this precise moment.
Wow, Hare Krishna.
By your mercy,
Hare Krishna.
Just in case this verse is 11th canto, chapter 14, verse 16. For those who are more sloka nerds and would like to, not nerds, but commit that by heart, because it's a beautiful meditation, right? So for me, this could be like a verse that very beautifully depicts Kartik and the fact of these 2 months and why Krishna is coming in this particular order and how he really follows behind the feet of his devotees, like in trance, like completely captured, just like, no, he has no other option, if you want to put it that way. No, he's fallen in love. He's in a fallen condition, and Sri Radha's love personifies. So we can only imagine how much he becomes affected by that, and how, again, in his humility, for me, this verse speaks a lot about God's humility. He's saying, I wish to become bathed by the dust of the feet of my devotees, you ultimately Sri Radha. Again, it's just how we should apply our logic when we read these verses. Yeah, the verse speaks about devotees in general, but we know that there is someone who is the highest devotee, so this verse must naturally, ultimately speak about her. No? So these are some of the ways I will say, like, for me, it reminds me how the Goswamis will find Sri Radha in the Bhagavatam, so to say. No? How it's not overtly talking about her, but with a certain Gaudiya common sense, so to say, we can like play out the implications of each of these statements and how they naturally converge in her. No? So that's from that place, I really can understand why sometimes we hear, okay, every verse of the Bhagavatam ultimately speaks about Sri Radha. So yeah, these are some thoughts that are coming today. Of course, some other things could be said, but I prefer to leave it at that, on that high point.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
You seem satisfied.
More than I
We
expected.
can go to the next question.
Totally. I'm like a little ecstatic. Yeah.
Thanks for the question. It wouldn't have come if not for your contribution as well. So thank you, Brandon. Okay, next question. Raise hand from Ireland. Twetwadip Radhika, Amanda Vikram. Nice to see you both.
Nice to see you too. So my question. So in my experience, I mean, just seeing around, there are some like sannyasi or guru figure personalities, like, you know, who seem like so powerful, like just in their presence, like, you know, just being around them, like feels so nourishing and powerful. But somehow like they seem unapproachable, you know, like if you try to like, you know, talk to them or like, you know, approach them, they're not so accepting, you know. So so when that happens, like, you know, it feels like a rejection and kind of like not so good feeling, you know, like and then we could wonder like is this the right thing, you know, like Krishna can't be rejecting us, like why do we feel rejection? And then there's also this angle of developing humility, and then we think it's okay, it's good for like our humility or something like that. So just trying to understand, like, you know, what's the like right mindset in this, you know, like do we then like, you know, continue to like, you know, approach, or like, you know, like this example of Narottam Das Thakur, like going after his Gurudev, like, you know, because he wasn't being accepted like right away. So something like that, like I see there are devotees who like continuously try again and again, whereas like some just like think, oh, this is not for me, and just disconnect or like move away or something like that. So just trying to understand how to, you know, approach that, or understand that in the right way.
Okay, thank you. Of course, first thing I will say, as I used to say sometimes, to me, it feels that what you are referring to is a specific situation that you have gone through, or you're going through, or someone has gone through. Although many of us have gone through in different cases, but probably you're asking the question with one particular case or situation in mind, which of course I'm not expecting that you will share all the details here in public, but my point is, since I don't know the details of the situation, I cannot tell what's going on, what's in that situation, whether so to say, the particular guru is being neglectful in a way that shouldn't be happening, or whether there's no neglect from that person, but we feel neglected, and why we feel neglected, who feels neglected, why they feel. There are so many possibilities. So there's no right answer, in the sense that I don't know the details. But I can say something in general, of course, hoping that something hits the mark. And if not, we will be seeing each other in a few days and we can be more specific in private. But of course, it gets tricky when you become, if we are talking about someone who is, I don't know, very renowned and very famous and with lots of followers and with lots of busy dynamics, it can get tricky to keep it personal. It can, I mean, it's a challenge, but it should continue to happen. I know many great Gaudiya acharyas, or not even Gaudiya acharyas, like famous people. No, you don't need to be a Gaudiya acharya in order to be famous. No, I know people who are even more renowned like all Gaudiya acharyas, current, so to say. I don't know, someone like Richard Rohr, for example. He's famous. I mean, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of, nor to say millions of people know him. Just to give an example, first-hand experience from my side. And he's very busy, and he's not that he's fully available to talk with anyone who wants to talk to him for hours per day, because he has many things to do. He has many responsibilities. But in my personal experience, when I was able to talk to him, to share with him personally, that was absolutely intimate and personal and radically personal and totally down to earth. And I mean, if you wouldn't know him, you wouldn't think, okay, this person is a famous personality. You follow my point? So I think that's important to remain sober. Not the whole thing of fame is a big topic. And I had that with also some Gaudiya teachers that I met, that I really had very personal, intimate sharing with Radha Swami. I remember also we had a very nice 4-hour conversation in Alachua last year, and it was very casual, so to say, no, like one-to-one. Not that I want to put myself as an equal, but he put himself from that place, so it was natural. So I think, and I'm not saying everyone should do it like him or like them, each one is their own person, but somehow or other, I think when you have big following and are not that available, still you have to remain as human and friendly and in close as possible to keep your own sobriety, right? Because if not, you start to enter into a character and to lose touch with who you are, and to start to, how to say, to submit to the audience's over idealization of who you are. Because like it or not, someone who is famous, you start to see that person differently. Although that person is an ordinary human being like everyone else, so to say, if someone is famous, there is something, again, that's one of the 6 opulences of Bhagavan. So somehow, whomever has some measure of that creates some sense of, wow, there is that person who is totally famous. Of course, if you don't know that person is famous, it's just one more person. So it's interesting what fame triggers in psychology. And of course, it's delicate. We know many stories of famous people who have killed themselves, or who have really escaped fame because it was throwing them into such a superficial sense of identity, and have to compromise all that they want to be and so on. So it's important to, I'm saying probably all this for myself, not that I'm famous, but just if you have a few more thousand YouTube followers than other people, in by comparison, one may say one is famous. And even if you are famous in the sense that one person admires you, still you have to know how to deal with that without going crazy, right? So that to begin with, I will say. But again, sometimes some great guru or personality, of course, a separate thing is that someone has lots of followers and is famous. Doesn't mean that is a very realized person. No, we shouldn't conflate the two. Of course, you can be very realized and have lots of followers. That also can happen. But sometimes, as disciples, we may have a very, how to say, rock star template in how we measure adhikar. No, like, so if someone is famous and comes with an entourage of 3,000 people, it's like, wow, that person must be very powerful or very important and very something, just because of the numbers around him or her. Well, that's not necessarily the case. No, there's so many famous people who are not precisely the most virtuous, right? So we should also be careful not to conflate these two things, because many times we are pretty superficial in our, we can be pretty superficial in our inspiration and just get like, how to say, get a little bit like, what's this word? It's not coming to my, like inflamed or something like that by being in a situation with lots of people and fame and prestige, and it somehow indirectly creates this subtle connection. Like, if I just have a connection with that person, I'm somehow possessing a part of what that person has. No? So if this person is super famous and I get to be his disciple, somehow I'm part of that thing as well. No? And maybe the motivation, is not as deep as it should. So that's also an important consideration. No, today we'll be talking later about all this, so I won't go into the details. But why, as disciples, what we are looking in a guru, as simple as that sounds, no? Why I want to be a disciple, right? So why do I want a guru? What I'm looking in a guru? What do I need as a disciple? And it's important that we reply to all the things from a place as sincere as possible. And again, it can happen that sometimes a guru may be personal and bona fide and everything nice, but in a very busy dynamic, maybe we were over expecting the glance, the glorious glance of the day, or some particular gesture, and the guru didn't even look at us. Not because there was nothing personal. It's just he didn't look at us. There were 300 people, and we just were not the ones that met his glance. And it was nothing against us. That can happen. I've seen that many times happening. And again, that goes to the disciple. What I'm expecting, what I'm looking in a guru. Probably in some cases, not always, but some cases, as disciples, we are still carrying some unresolved daddy issues. Our fathers were emotionally neglectful, and we are just hoping someone who will look at us, who will notice our presence, who will validate our existence, which is totally fine. Everyone needs that, but that can go too far. And every time we are kind of, if I receive the glance of my Gurudev, I'm absolutely in ecstasy and I feel chosen and sheltered, and I'm like touching the sky. But when the glance is not there, the whole world collapses. And again, Krishna is angry with me. He must be chastising me through his agent. What must I have done wrong? Who knows? So many possibilities of delusion sometimes, right? So again, I'm not have a clear picture of the specific situation. I'm just throwing a whole array of possible scenarios that can be there, whether in the direction of the guru or the disciple, in case there may be wrong, one, the other, both, sometimes both. Or again, sometimes it's just a natural dynamics. I don't need to be noticed at every moment physically by my guru. I shouldn't also go neurotic. Oh, Gurudev actually look at me, but he's neglecting me on purpose to test me and challenge me. It may happen in some case, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And one more thing that comes to my mind, you mentioned this relationship between Lokanath Goswami and Narottam Das Thakur, and how Lokanath Goswami did not accept Narottam Das Thakur. I wouldn't put it that way. No, I wouldn't say that Lokanath Goswami did not accept Narottam Das Thakur, no, because the whole situation was Narottam Das Thakur requested Diksha from Lokanath Goswami. And that's the thing that Lokanath Goswami did not accept initially, but that doesn't mean he's not accepting overall, in total, Narottam Das Thakur. No, he accepted, but he had made a vow, as you know the story. He made a vow, I will not give Diksha to anyone. So also he was, as they say in the United States, between a rock and a hard place. So what to do? And Narottam Das Thakur continued to serve him and so on. But it's not like Lokanath Goswami did not accept him or reject him. At the end of the day, as we know, he ended up breaking his own vow to accept a higher vow. No, like we many times speak about that. Sometimes we need to know when to break vows for the sake of a higher vow. So Lokanath Goswami say, okay, I made this vow of not accepting disciples, but Narottam Das made a vow. It seems he made a vow of me being his guru, and it seems that his vow is stronger than my vow. Therefore, I'm defeated. No, my disciple defeated me. No, it's interesting. Then you have a guru acknowledging defeat at the hands of his disciples. It's a glorious defeat. It's not defeat in any negative way. No, but he's saying he has a stronger vow than me. No, I made certain vow, no diksha to anyone. Narottam, day one vow, I will get diksha from Lokanath Goswami, and he defeated me. No, so that's a beautiful exchange. Try to imagine the situation, right? Lokanath Goswami going to his disciples saying, Narottam, you are more powerful than me. You are making me break my vow by the strength of your love. I'm defeated by you. And because of that, in trying to reciprocate with this, trying to pay back, I accept you as my disciple. Right? So that's the norm. That's the ideal guru-disciple relationship. These things could happen. I don't want to say should happen, but there should be a place for these things happening and being especially glorious and charming, actually, right? So anyhow, I don't want to digress in that direction too much. So that's what I can say so far, Swetadev Radhika. I hope something of that resonates without having to enter into details publicly.
Yeah, I mean, the last part specifically was helpful. I mean, yeah, I guess it would be helpful to talk to you with giving the specific details. But yeah, I mean, it's not just my experience alone, just many others also. Yeah. And I think it's very likely it's the busy dynamic, but yeah, we can talk about it more in the UK. We did discuss this just a couple of days ago with some UK devotees also, so maybe we can bring it up and talk more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question from Lakshmi Priya from Austria, Argentina. I don't know how to put it. Born in Argentina, living in Austria.
Exactly. Haribol Maharaj, pranams, and pranams to all Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. Maharaj, today I was doing my morning program and Shikshastakam came. And I was thinking of when Mahaprabhu indicates this famous shloka of being more tolerant than the tree and more humble than the blade of grass, but how to apply that? Because I noticed, okay, I'm repeating this the whole time, but especially the part of being lower than the blade of grass, where is the limit for my limit, sometimes that can be exploited somehow. And so how to deal or how to apply this in everyday life?
Yeah, of course, very important question. We talked recently about that, but I don't recall where already. So maybe it was an ISTAGOSTHI, maybe it was a private walk here, some other lecture, or I've been writing about it and I think that I talked to someone else. So I'm talking with myself. Sorry, I'm going crazy a little bit. But that's an important question because that's the most important thing that Mahaprabhu said in one sense. Of course, many things he says are the most important, but in one sense for us, that's the golden rule. Every religion has their golden rule. Don't do to others what you don't do to yourself, and love your neighbor as you, and so on. So this is somehow our golden rule, our ethic of behavior when practicing, when embracing the process that will take us to perfection. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami will say, if you chant the name of Krishna, which as we talked already these days, it's not just chanting, but how you live your whole life. By following this verse, you attain prem, you attain the goal. If you do not go through this verse, you can be chanting and practicing for millions of lifetimes and probably not yet there. So he's making an important point, like don't miss this verse. Now, at the same time, paradoxically, many people have been traumatized by this verse, not by the verse itself, but by the misapplication, misunderstanding, imposition of, like, I don't know, justification of abuse. Some things are going on and you should be more tolerant than a tree, no? Or I have a question, something that I need to ask, don't ask, be more humble than a blade of grass, like blind submission, no critical thinking, total surrender. And total surrender is great, but out of context is not great, and it's not total surrender. So it's very, in my opinion, very necessary to somehow reframe this verse. No, I mean, not cancel the verse, but just rediscover its essence in a way that is relatable to us, that we can really feel inspired, like, yes, I want that. I want to be more humble than a blade of grass. No, I wouldn't say lower, because just the word lower, I will say in general, triggers some scars, triggers some stuff there. No, so more humble than a blade of grass, or as humble, whatever you want. So it's how to understand it. So recently, when I started to write this book on unconditional love, came this verse of Shikshastakam, and how to interpret or read this verse through the lenses of unconditional love. So I can really share some thoughts on that. And of course, it can take lots of time, so I will concentrate more on the first line, because that's the one you're asking about. So, Trinada Pisanichena. Mahaprabhu says, be more humble than the blade of grass. Of course, he's not saying that from a place of, imposition. No? To begin with, he's doing that himself. No? So it's important to understand who is saying that, and how much that person is walking his talk, how much that person is personifying what he's inviting us to do. So Mahaprabhu is the ultimate example of humility. If we study his life, he's perfectly humble. So someone who is tasting perfect humility naturally feels inspired to see others doing the same thing, because he knows, okay, this is so incredible to be in this place. Please be humble. But again, all this in a certain context. So let's analyze this line in the context of unconditional love, what we have been talking many times recently, which is the idea that Krishna loves everyone, basically, unconditionally, including you, including me, including everyone. So how to be as humble as the quiet grass. Not, of course, the first point is this verse is inviting us to learn from everything, to look at nature and to find guru everywhere. So one aspect of this line is redeem your relationship with matter. Appreciate how the grass is bending very naturally. It's incredibly flexible, no, in its ability to adapt. So we should strive to do the same. That's the point. No, we could describe that first line in terms of flexibility, right? That could be another way, maybe more healing, to speak about humility. No, humility, the willingness to adapt and be flexible to accommodate reality as it comes to our lives. Adaptability, the survival of the fittest in Darwinian terms, right? Those who can change are the ones who thrive. So it's more an invitation for that. Again, it's not blind submission. Be flexible, be adaptable, and understand the value of that, and understand the importance of that. In the Bible, they say the meek shall inherit the earth, right? So the humble will inherit the reign, the kingdom of God, and the earth and more. So again, Mahaprabhu here is comparing humility to grass. It's bending, but it's not breaking. So it's important, because sometimes in the name of this verse, we are breaking people. We are breaking down people. No, in the name of be more humble than the grass. But the grass is bending, but not breaking. So it also speaks about I should learn to bend in a way that I'm not breaking. So all this starts to show this form of humility is not about self-deprecation. No, it's not about lashing yourself with a whip, with the whip of self-rejection and all this type of unnecessary self-chastisement, so to say. No, nor is it even about competing about who is the most fallen. No, because I've seen that sometimes in some devotee circle. And the whole idea of humility and being more humble than a blade of grass becomes an ego thing. Let's see who is the most fallen, right? So no, it involves what we have described: flexibility, adaptability, bending without breaking, an openness to truth, a willingness to grow, to transform. Even when sometimes, in order to do so, I have to take a strong stance to remain true to that truth. A stance that sometimes on the outside, it doesn't seem humble, right? The essence of true humility, Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta will say, is total sympathy for truth. So sometimes, in order to remain aligned and adhere to the truth, I may behave externally in a way that doesn't seem humble if we understand humility just like, yes, dandavat, I'm more falling. That's not necessarily humility. That can be complacency. That can be evasiveness. I can use a whole facade. I can use the external form of humility to avoid the internal substance of humility. So humility cannot be measured by my external performance or by the mudras I'm making externally. But what's the level of loyalty and commitment to the truth? So those are some initial thoughts. I haven't touched yet up how we can think of humility in terms of God's unconditional love, but I think what I've shared so far is important on how to read this first line in a redemptive and healing way. And in connection to Krishna's unconditional love, be as humble as the quiet grass implies, okay, Krishna is loving everyone unconditionally. So I'm humbled by that to begin with. I'm humbled, not humble, but humbled by the fact that everyone is being loved by God unconditionally. I'm humbled by God's humility, which allows him to love everyone unconditionally, despite people insulting him, denying him, rejecting him, escaping from him, attacking him. He keeps loving them. Wow. What humility Krishna must have. I'm humbled by thinking about that humility. Wow. And I'm included in that list, right? So I'm loved unconditionally despite all my ups and downs and messiness. That's humbling. And everyone else is loved in that same way, even the blade of grass, right? So the glass is humbly sustained by Krishna's love, and all of us are as well. So that should invoke a type of humility. Everything is loved without limits by God. So we should be humbled by this realization, how Krishna loves everyone so deeply, and especially by the realization how he loves us so deeply. And even we could say by the very essence of who we are, as I sometimes like to quote Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verse 29, what Krishna says 3 times as Charyavat, speaking about the soul as amazing. 3 times say, you are amazing, amazing, amazing. So I'm humbled by that. Why? Because of course someone may think, no, you will, if you say that you're amazing 3 times, you will surely become proud. Yeah, but the thing here is that the amazingness of who I am as a soul is not my own creation. So I have no reason, no real reason to become proud. I have all reasons to be humbled, to say, wow, I can say I am amazing 3 times or more, and at the same time be humbled by the fact of what the Atma is. I am an Atma, I'm a soul, but I'm not my own creation, and I am amazing, and I'm loved by Krishna, despite not being aware that I am amazing and that he is amazing. Right? So this amazement should lead us to humility. Like awe and wonder sometimes is preliminary to surrender. Oh, wow, something creates awe and wonder. I want to give myself to that. Something creates amazement. I become humbled by that. I'm not self-made, but I'm loved by God and I'm amazing. So anyhow, I think it's an important point, and from that place we can realize, no, I'm being loved by Krishna, and whenever I'm able to love him back, that love is a gift that I've received. Bhakti is a gift, so I'm humbled by that also, by the bare nature of bhakti. We have no reason to become proud. No, technically speaking, how can you be proud of a gift that has been given to you absolutely for free, without you deserving, earning merit for that? So those are some thoughts that come to my mind in how we can recalibrate, reframe, translate this first line, be as humble as the blade of grass, and in a way that is not triggering trauma or creating new trauma or justifying abuse and so many things that sometimes without intention we have created just because of not being able to handle these concepts in a healthy way. Now, like one more thing, and I'm concluding here the answer. Like today during lunch, we were talking with Bhakti Rasa Martina, who are there, and also Anupam, who was with us during lunch, about this line from Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami. Jagai madai haiti munis se papista, purishera hita kaiti munis se lagista. I'm more sinful than Jagai Madai, and then comes the other line. I am lower than the worm in the stool. No? So for some, that's even like, that's like lower than a blade of grass. You thought that was the last one? No, here comes the real one. You're not lower than the blade of grass. You have to be lower than the worm in the stool. No? So hopefully you can get that one. Right? And sometimes we have been throwing these types of ideas onto each other or onto ourselves, but without sensitivity, without context, without taking the time to be empathic with the author, why he said that, in which context, which was the imaginary, the cultural imaginary that people had at that time in Bengal 500 years ago, why they're referring to a worm. Why? Because we are just reading and interpreting all that from our own postmodern Western mind, and that may create very disjointed experience. So we were talking how, first of all, who say that? Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, he's talking about himself, right? He's saying, I am this. So he's not saying you are that. So that's his own statement, and we are not Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, so we have no clue from which place he's saying that and how is he feeling. Of course, in general, we have an idea how is he feeling. He's the greatest of all devotees. He has a type of humility that may be too humble for us to understand it. So we have to be careful not to imitate it. No, it's almost a crime to take a line from someone like Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, where he's speaking about himself, and to try to impose that on someone else who is not Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, and try to just make that person say or feel the same thing. Well, actually, it's not the same, because we're imposing something that we ourselves do not even understand on others, on ourselves. So again, we have to do some context work, so to say, to put all the things in context instead of the history at the time, the language of the time, the imaginary of the time, the symbols, the examples. And one way that you can explain this idea of worm lower than the worm in the stool in a healthy way, there's place for that, is very simple. Is a worm in the stool. Stool is generally seen as something not very exalted, let's put it that way. Something that if you touch it, you will consider normally that's dirt, I have to clean myself, I'm contaminated, polluted, whatever. But what does a worm do in the stool? It creates compost, right? So out of something polluting, something nourishing is coming. No? So the worm is having the capacity of transforming what otherwise could be seen as something low into something nourishing and positive. No? So that's a way basically of saying that. No? The worm has that capacity. And many times I don't have that capacity. Many times I'm not able to extract something positive from something apparently negative. Sometimes I'm confronted with a so-called negative thing that I label as negative, and I don't allow that situation to become all that it can be in a positive sense. So in that sense, I'm lower than the worm in the stool. And I can say that with that understanding, and hopefully it's not triggering the same trauma that you've heard, that you felt every time you heard that same line out of context. No? So I'm just giving an example of one line, which is very much historically related to the first line of Shikshastakam, and how much we need to do some collective generational healing work in terms of going to all these sections and how they have been understood and passed on historically, generationally, in some cases at least. And if they are creating negative, unnecessary experiences, what do we need to do? We don't need to delete the verse, no, edit that section. We need just to recontextualize and understand them with sensitivity, no? So that's what we are trying. No, not always it works perfectly, but it's an important task that all of us have to be engaged when we are reading Shastra, receiving instruction from sadhus. Again, what's the context, what's the language, what's the culture? There's all these relative connotations in the packaging, like surrounding the absolute essence of that. There is an absolute essence, but it may come in a relative, cultural, socially specific packaging. We need to separate, as Sri Maharaj will say, between form and substance. That's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur will call be a saragrahi, right? An essence grasper. So we belong to the Bhaktivinoda Parivar, so we have no excuse not to be saragrahis. So it's to be or not to be. Shakespeare said that before all of us. So I hope that helps, Lakshmi Priya. I don't know.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. It is very inspiring. So a new perspective about it. So yeah, thank you so much, Maharaj.
Thank you. Maybe next time we may need to go to the second line, but for other
yeah, that would be awesome.
Be more tolerant than a tree.
Yeah.
Next is ISTAGOSTHI. No problem.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, let's go to Dibyangana from France. Welcome.
Good. Yes, Maharaj, I also had a question about a verse of Isopanisad.
Okay.
And it's number 12, so I'm not sure I won't risk maybe to read it in Sanskrit, but basically it's saying those who have a cult for devas are going to the deepness of ignorance. And even more lower, those who will have a cult for impersonal absolute. And for me, it's very difficult to understand because I've heard a complete different message from sadhus, including you, including other sadhus. And, I've understood also that we say like Krishna, our God, he will reciprocate with our love in which way we want to express it. So if someone is maybe more relating to an impersonal expression of God, why not? And also, we call him Krishna, but maybe other will call him other way. And for me, I feel like it's just fine. But so I don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's an important question for sure. How to understand that? So I have the verse here. So I will share in the just in case for those who would like to reread it. I will share it again here. That is Srila Prabhupada's translation. Of course, there are different translations. So his translation is similar to the one you shared. It says, those who are engaged in the worship of demigods enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and still more so do the worshippers of the impersonal absolute. So what to do with that verse? And again, should we edit it? Like some may think, okay, let's better delete the first line of Shikshastakam or worn lower than the worm in a stool. Let's eliminate that from the scripture. And what to do with verse 12 of the Isopanisad? It's complicated. No, we shouldn't do so. We should just, ask questions like Divyangana is just doing, and let's try to understand it all together. So to begin with, I will say that the Sanskrit in many occasions lends itself to be read and understood in different ways. So there is a way that this verse could be read not necessarily referring to the impersonal aspect of God. No? Here Srila Prabhupada ascribes the word impersonal to the Sanskrit term sambhutyam. But not necessarily, I mean, I'm not saying that it's an invalid reading, but it's not necessarily the only reading. So sometimes also I've heard that sambhutyam can be connected to the worship of bhutas, or like sometimes like if you want to call it ghosts or like phantasmagorical entities. So if taken from that place, you could say, okay, it makes sense that the gradation goes in that direction. No? Someone is worshiping demigods, and still with the devas, the language can be intense, right? Like the darkest region of ignorance by worshiping the devas, like why so intense, right? I thought the devas were not that bad guys, right? They are kind of the good guys, and the asuras are the bad guys, so to say. So still we have to solve that one. But I'm just mentioning first that the word sambhutyam doesn't necessarily need to be understood as something impersonal. It can, and of course, in that case, why then that expression? We will go there. But why also, again, the expression worshiping the devas to the darkest region of ignorance, and even worse, if you worship the impersonal aspect of the divine, while, as you properly say, Divyangana, that's a possible goal. Actually, I mean, it's possible that you attain Brahman. Yesterday we were quoting in our class on non-dual thinking, we're talking about this famous verse of the Gita, of the Bhagavatam 1-11. Badanti tat tattva vidas tattva jnana nadvayam brahmeti paramadmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. So right from the start, the Bhagavatam is speaking about Brahman, Paramatman, Bhagavan. So the possibility of Brahman is present in the Bhagavatam, throughout the Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita. I mean, it's there. It's not our cup of tea. No, it's not our own choice. We are not pointing in that direction because of the bhakti samskars we have received that are taking us, inspiring us in another direction. We have received that possibility, but someone who has received Gyan samskar for 3 decades, so to say, for that person, there's no probably other thinking. He said, yeah, I go for Brahman, and there's a place for that. No, sometimes to be honest with you, today in the morning I was I was listening one lecture that Pranada recommended one lecture from Advaita Das, Edwin Bryan recently, but I was not watching that one. I was watching another one. But it was given at a Vedanta center in United States, which is basically connected with Swami Vivekananda, Ramakrishna. So they are technically impersonalists, if you want to use that word, right? And at the end comes a Swami, famous Swami local from the area, Swami Sarvapriyananda. He's talking about bhakti and gyan and acknowledging both, and speaking nicely, speaking nicely about both. No, and I was thinking, wow. By contrast, we only speak nicely about us and condemn them as much as we can. And I can understand that at some time that was a necessity, but in my personal opinion, I don't feel that's the best way to address that. And actually, I was feeling I will contact Swami Sarvapriyananda, invite him to my podcast, because he sounds to me a very interesting person. And I remember some years ago, someone invited him, a Gaudiya Vaishnava invited him to a podcast, but just with intention of refuting him and destroying Mayabad and all that stuff. And I was kind of embarrassed watching that. It's like, that's the reference we are giving? No, I don't feel comfortable. So anyhow, for me, the point is, yes, some people may like to go to Brahman. It's not our preferred choice, but it's a possibility in eternity. So if that's possible in eternity, it cannot be that bad, right? If you can remain there forever, there must be something good about it. If not, we are starting to posit the idea of eternal hell, so to say. So why then in these verses we hear this expression that seem to speak about Brahman or even the planets of the demigods as hellish, the darkest regions of ignorance? Like, for example, this verse of Chaitanya Chandramrita by Prabodhananda Saraswati, he will say, Kaivalyam narakayate tridashapur akasha pushpayate. That's only the first line. That's enough. He's saying, Kaivalyam narakayate. Kaivalya means impersonal liberation. He said, narakayate. Naraka means hell. So, impersonal liberation is hellish, that he said. And then, Kaivalyam narakayate tridashapur akasha pushpayate. And the goal of attaining the planet of the demigods is like a flower in the sky, which basically means pure phantasmagoria. Now, you don't see flowers in the sky. They are not in the sky. They are on earth. So you are hallucinating if you see a flower in the sky. So he says, whatever is offered in the from the devas is phantasmagoria. And impersonal liberation, hell. So we're like, whoa. That's not for an interfaith dialogue, for sure. Don't go to an interfaith dialogue with that one line. So the real question is, again, why they're saying all the things? Are we fanatics? Are we all fundamentalists that we just think our own thing is the best and everyone else is absolutely wrong? No, I wouldn't say that. At least not in principle. Sometimes we represent our tradition that way. But all these statements come more from a place of bhava, come more from a place of like deep emotional experience of the nectar, let's put it this way, of the sweetness and nectar of a personal relationship with God. And for that person, in that particular experience, in a very subjective way, that person may say things like this. Now, in comparison to this, everything else is hellish. Everything else is this or that. But it's coming from their own subjective experience. In the same way, I don't know, you can say, I can say, I'll go to me. Okay, butternut squash is heavenly. By eggplant is hellish. No, it's horrible. And of course, some of you say, Maharaj, why are such an aparadi? No, eggplant aparad. No, most of you may love eggplant. For you, eggplant is like visiting the city of Indra, tasting eggplant. But for me, it's hell. I really dislike it. I should have unconditional love for everyone, including eggplant. Sorry, I'm not there yet. But from a subjective perspective, I may express that type of things. It's not that it's bad in itself, but in my personal taste and experience, that's not for me at all. And especially if I'm tasting the higher thing that is the most favorite for me. So that's how we can understand this type of statements where they seem like to downplay other attainments, other situations. It's not that they're absolutely rejected, because in other parts of the scripture, as you mentioned, the Vyanjana, this is mentioned, there's prescribed methods to worship the demigods, to attain their realms. All that is there, is praised in many Vedas. But from a larger picture, by comparison, Krishna may say things to Arjuna like, all those goals from the Vedas are inferior by comparison from the bigger picture. So something like that, right? But for some people, that's the best, and that's what they need. And the Vedas are there to encourage that. But from a more impartial perspective, let's put it that way, there is some hierarchy, no? From an impartial perspective, it's not the same. For example, Rupa Goswami said that the type of ananda or ecstasy that you find on earth, they give even this type of numbers. Now, if you multiply, just to give an idea, if you multiply the happiness and sense enjoyment in this body, this type of million times, it starts to resemble to the enjoyment they're having in the heavenly planets. And now, if you take that and multiply that this 100 trillion times, it starts to resemble to what it means to merge into Brahman. But if you multiply these 100-fold, million times, this is what it means to be in love with Bhagavan. In comparison to that ocean of Ananda, the happiness of Brahman is like the water contained in the hoof, in the calf, how would say, hoof print of a calf. So they give these types of comparison, but it doesn't mean that we should become sectarian and hate others and develop superiority complex. It's just, there is an impartial way of saying, this is the, let's put it, the sweetest thing. I wouldn't even use the highest thing, because highest is, in one sense, is very subjective. What's highest for me? What's highest for you? I always give this example, going back to food stuff, of the fruits, right? I may say, impartially speaking, objectively speaking, the sweetest fruit is, I don't know, mango probably, or some other. But subjectively speaking, some of you may say, okay, but that's not my favorite. I like bananas more. So, okay, mango is the sweetest, that's fine. My favorite is banana. You follow my point? So in the same way, we can make a case, and Gaudiya Vaishnava have made the case, the worship of Krishna in Vrindavan in full intimacy is the sweetest. And we can make that case, but that doesn't mean that everyone else is wrong and we are higher. It's just, some people will say, okay, that's the sweetest, but I don't like sweet that much. No, some people may have spiritual diabetes or whatever. However you may like to put it, right? It's too sweet for some people. No, like mango is too sweet for some people. I like bananas. And that's great. Now, that's what Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami say. Every devotee feels their relationship with God is the best, and everyone is correct. So somehow we can take that same verse and extend it a little bit to every practitioner experiences their aspect of the absolute as the best, even including Brahman. And everyone is correct if that corresponds with something that is eternal and perpetual. So I would say that we can understand these statements from Shastra more coming from a bhava perspective, of some ecstatic perception of something being the great, the highest, and you cannot contain, and you are expressing that in a way that it may sound like fanatical. But when you understand from which place it's coming, like Rasang is mentioning in the comment, like, okay, my father is the best. And there's a place for you to feel my daddy is the best. The problem is when you go out and start convincing every other children of planet Earth that your daddy is the best and not theirs. That when it becomes a problem. So yeah, I would say that's how we can understand these sections in a broader picture, understanding that other sections say otherwise, other sections support those things that these verses seem to be condemning. So therefore, this needs to be understood more coming from a perspective of subjective personal ecstasy, so to say, or subjective personal comparison according to one's own taste. But again, it doesn't mean that it has to be the universal application for each and everyone. So thank you for the question. I hope that helps, Divyangana. And we have 2 more hands raised, but I don't know if I have time. Rasangi, you may have to forgive me if possible, if I'm not having enough time, because of course we want to make also the closing breakout rooms as usual. So let's go to Narottam's question, and let's see if we have time for Rasangi's, because again, I have another lecture and then another lecture after that one. So yes.
Haribol, all glories to you, Maharaj, all glories to the assembled Vaishnavas. I had a question on Vaishnav compassion. I've been reflecting on it a lot, and also reflecting on Jesus's teaching, saying to forgive 77 times. And I've been associating with a devotee who has some mental health issues, and I want to be humble and help them, but there's also a lot of offenses being committed, and yeah, I want to know, like, how compassionate can we be? Like, if this person is starting to affect our sadhana, like, is it okay to take a step back, or should we continue to try?
Yeah. Okay. somehow this goes to the second line of the third verse of Sikshastakam now. Tarori Vasahishana. Because Mahaprabhu there speaks about tolerance, but actually the tolerance, and I would not go into that fully, but tolerance can be also translated as compassion and forgiveness. No? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says this second line speaks about some compassion. How does he say? Yeah, full compassion free from envy. No? The tolerance that Mahaprabhu is describing, and compassion also has to do with forgiveness. I like to use the word forgiveness in connection to compassion. I like to learning to forgive, not only other people, but yourself as well. So in the situation like the one you describe again, I'm only aware of the few details you've shared. I'm sure there are more details, so I cannot speak absolutely in detail about that situation. I will say if someone has mental problems, of course, there are so many mental problems. I'm still talking in general ways. But I wouldn't, if someone has a mental problem, I wouldn't that easy consider whatever may come from that person as an offense, right? Who knows from which place that reaction is coming, how intentional that is, and how much is more sometimes a short-circuiting of the system. So I wouldn't like label that too quickly. Again, I don't know more details than that, but I can say knowing some mental health landscapes, sometimes people ends up doing and saying crazy stuff, but it's not really something that they mean. It's just like there's some short-circuiting of the system, and that happens. And even sometimes they return to normal, not even remembering what happens. So I wouldn't apply in that case the normal thinking that we have, normal discernment when we have in relation to aparat. But of course, even saying that, by saying that, I'm not saying, so therefore, Narottam, stay there, because there is no aparat being committed, so you just remain there, remain there, remain there. I don't know, because, of course, if you feel personal, this is too much, this is overwhelming, or I don't know what to do, I don't feel I can really change the situation, and actually by insisting on being there, instead of changing the situation and being changed by the situation in a not so favorable way, I may need to take distance and show some compassion to myself as well. Because the point when we speak about compassion is that it has to be directed in all directions equally. It's not that in the name of showing compassion to someone else, I end up being not at all compassionate toward me. That's not compassion. Real compassion has to be, again, comprehensive, so to say. I am being compassionate toward you in a way that is compassionate toward me as well. And that's, again, related to what we were talking before with the verse on humility and all the things, that whenever we exhibit some of these qualities towards someone, it has to be in a way that is also honoring our own self in a healthy way. Not that I'm showing respect to you, honoring you, and I'm feeling totally bad about myself. There's something wrong there. No? So it has to be directed in all possible directions. So in some cases, the most compassionate thing to do, according to our capacity also, is to take some distance, some compassionate distance. Still, the distance can be compassionate. Doesn't mean that being compassionate is just being there, present, insisting on 3D, so to say, to be with the person. Sometimes we may be in a relationship with someone, or we may like to see someone else changing, or we may like to help someone, but if the other person is not willing to change, we may need to take a distance, stop insisting, and direct our prayers and well-wishing and compassion from a safer place than trying to be too close, which may create more disturbance. And in that disturbance, I may lose my capacity of remaining compassionate. No? So we have to take a stance, whatever that is, so we can remain compassionate, whether that is next to you or some distance from you. But the principle is, I want to show compassion and forgiveness to you, to me. So what do I need to do in this particular situation for that principle to remain intact? Do I need to get closer to you? Do I need to get farther away from you? Whatever the case, but it has to be done from that place. So if it's done from that place, you can take a distance from a compassionate place and it's totally legal, fine. And in some other cases, I can insist on getting closer to the other person, but not from a compassionate place. Just being attached to a result, trying to convince the other person, who knows what. So like what when Rupa Goswami describes, how to relate in Upadeshamrita, how to relate to God, devotees, innocent people, and envious people. So he says, you love God, you are friends with the devotees, you show compassion to innocent people, and you take a distance from the envious. But he says all these four relationships are all to be done in the context of seva. So I'm doing all that in service to them. Whether I'm loving them, I'm befriending them, I'm being compassionate to them, or I'm taking a distance from them. It's all in service to that person. Although externally it may seem like getting far from someone is service. In some cases, yes. No, it's not what we want. It's not the type of service I would like to offer you. But if by your stance, you just pull me away over and over again, I may need to serve you from a very healthy and respectful distance. And also acknowledging my own capacities. I have to honor my limitations. I'm not a superhero. I would just go right into the core of the situation and transcend and not be affected and show universal compassion for. Come on, we are not necessarily Prahlad Maharaj. We are not necessarily Rantidev. The other day I was reading beautiful verse from the Bhagavatam, but of course, as beautiful as that is, it may be also equally impossible to follow, which is again a prayer from Rantidev, when he's saying basically praying in this classical way, like Vasudev Datta, like I want to I don't want to be liberated, just I want to remain here forever, basically, like I have no, like very bodhisattva like, in this mode of I'm willing to remain eternally on earth and deal with the problems of people. And it's beautiful and it's moving, but probably if you try to imitate that, it's not healthy. So we need to Bhagavatam say, try to acknowledge where you are, what's your adhikar, and act from that platform. And that acknowledgement, sincere recognizing of your present condition is real virtue, real beauty. So those are some of my thoughts. And again, I don't know the details of the situation, but I hope that may be of some use. So
that helps very much. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. So, will you forgive me, Rasangi? Can you wait? Can you wait one more week?
Yes, of course. I'll wait till next week.
We are talking about compassion and forgiveness. So please apply that to me in this precise moment. That was the trick.
I'm off on my time today, Maharaj. I was confused, so I came on late. But
Okay.
so I'll watch the rest. But I loved your talk with Carmen, though. Just wanted to say, fabulous.
Yeah, that was great.
So much love flowing back and forth.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen it, it's the latest podcast we shared with Carmen Acevedo, butcher from Christian tradition. So yeah, sometimes nobody knows these people, so maybe they won't watch it because I don't know who they are. They're not famous to me. But probably those are the ones who we still need to discover. So yeah, if you have time, very recommended. Okay, thank you so much to all of you for your time, for your presence, brotherhood, sisterhood, empathy, love. We'll see each other, for those who like, in half an hour for my next lecture of the light and shadow of between guru and disciple. And if not, of course, next Saturday for our ISTAGOSTHI. And for those in the UK, see you sooner and sooner. Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Harinam Prabhu ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanand Haribo, Vancha Kalpataru Vishya Kripa